Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Astrology with Janet. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back, and let's chat about what is happening up in the stars above for the week ahead. Today, this first day of fall or autumn in the northern hemisphere, first day of spring for those of you in the southern hemisphere. And all of that is to say, change is among us, upon us. Change is upon us. um, Hopefully, everybody had a great weekend, and yesterday's eclipse was smooth and filled with ease and grace for you. I know that for a lot of people, the eclipse season has been a doozy, right? Lots of things happening. I found out just before we went live this morning that one of my daughter's friends passed away last night from septic shock. My daughter's 42 years old, and this girl lost her life to something like septic shock. And I think shock says it all, right? And it's the thing, right, that happens with the seasons, especially the equinoxes and the solstices, when there are these gateways that sort of open up for big changes to occur, right, including the life death kinds of changes. And yesterday was a good day for us. My team won. Woohoo! Go Seahawks! And that was good. And the Rams lost. Yay, Rams losing! Because anybody that loses in our conference means we're moving up. Anyway, it was a good day. And yesterday, of course, Heather and I spent the day canning applesauce and spaghetti sauce, or kind of a tomato basil soup. And once we got that done, then it was just time to relax. So it was actually a really good day for us here, and not necessarily even notice. I did notice the eclipse because at right about the noon 54, which was when it was happening here on the West Coast, um, I realized I needed to take a break because I'd been, working all morning. And I thought, oh, I wonder where this is in my chart to make sure you take breaks. And indeed, it was, right? One of those things. Took a break to sit down, see the beginning of the game, because the game started right at, I think, 1:05. Anyway, so it was a good weekend for me. And yet, there are some sad things that are happening out there for others as well. And one thing we have to remember is, and we talked a lot about this on Friday, is that anytime we move into the eclipse windows, and not eclipse windows, but the equinox solstice windows, we enter into a time to reaffirm love in our lives. And on Friday, we talked about that at this point in time, the sun is in the gate of embodiment, or the love of the physical body, or the love of the physical world. Really an invitation for all of us to stay grounded and to be in the physical, right? To enjoy life in the physical, to bring all of the ideas and creative impulses down into the physical realm. And then the earth is at the gate of the love of spirit, the gate 25, where we have now this idea of the embodiment in the human is that of spirit, right? That we are spirit inhabiting the physical body. So we have this, kind of incarnation cross, if you will. And everybody has an incarnation cross in their human design. But what I'm talking about here is, in this incarnation cross, we are the confluence of both spirit and matter. So your presence during the equinoxes suggests that it's time for you to bring those things into focus, right? How can you be the physical embodiment of spirit? How can you express your divine love in the physical body? Because this is all about the season of love. These are gates of love, right? And every season change has a gate of love, whether it is the 4625 as it is now, or is it the 1015 as we'll have in December, or the 2546 that we have in the spring, or the 1510 that we have in the summer, right? Those equinoxes and solstices are always fine-tuning love energy in our lives. So That was the big deal. Now, together, these themes bring love is the answer back up to the surface, right? I hope you all got a chance to go watch that video that I posted the link to, um, and really got to listen to those words, right? What do those words evoke for you? And then today we have this opportunity to carry that theme of love is the answer through some very tricky times that lie just ahead of us here in as we end the month of September. So remember, love is not passive here. This isn't passive love, it's embodied. It's lived. And it asks us to bring spirit into matter, or bring love into matter, to remember that divine spirit in everything we do. And then to be very wise about how it is that we interact with the outer world when we see love that is not in action, right? When we see the exact opposite in the world around us. And how is it that we maintain love even when we see the most unloving things happening in that outer world? Now, today's sky brings big shifts. I mean, not only did we have early morning, East Coast time, 3 something in the morning, Mars moved into the sign of Scorpio. So for those of us on the West Coast, it happened just around midnight. And that is a time where passion intensifies. Scorpio is a sign that Mars rules. So he moves out of Libra, the sign where he was really definitely in the woods, in the weeds. This was not his favorite sign to be in. And now he's into a sign that he has rulership over. So we have co-rulership actually with the planet Pluto. So now we have this intensified passion and depth and intensity in everything, including the shadows, right? Because Scorpio as a sign brings up the shadows, the things in the dark, the things that we're not seeing clearly about ourselves. And then this afternoon, the sun will shift into Libra, called the autumn equinox here in the northern hemisphere. And a cosmic reset occurs with balance and harmony and partnership and justice and tact and diplomacy and negotiation and harmony. Again, harmony, right? Balance, equality, all of these qualities coming back up for us to observe in our own lives and in the world around us. And the two together, these gates of love and Mars moving into Scorpio and the equinox, is a call to bring love and balance and fairness into the places that feel most intense or feel most hidden. And some of those things are totally hidden from our sight, and other things that we are, getting glimpses of that we see that are, going wrong, things that we need to move through. So I thought, this morning after I say good morning to everybody, we're going to jump into this Mars story a little deeper, because it's not just the Mars story. As Mars moves into 0 degrees Scorpio, he comes into a square with Pluto in Aquarius. So the two rulers of the sign of Scorpio are in a very tense square right off the bat. So we start the week with this intensity. And I want to track the story of Mars and Pluto because, we track the story of the moon every month between the sun and the moon, right? Where we start with the new moon, where we just were yesterday, and we move through to the first square or the crisis of action. And then we move to the opposition or the full moon, a time of revelation, a time when things are really up in the faces of everybody. Then we move into the last square, also called the crisis of consciousness. And then we move back to the conjunction. So we have that same scale of energy going on between Mars and Pluto. So I want to take a look at that and, take a look at maybe some of the world events that happened in response to that Mars-Pluto energy and see if we can't make a prediction or at least a look ahead at what that might mean for us as we go into the week. complete with dates. So I want you to write the dates down, and I want you to think about what was going on in your own life when I give you those dates. But first, let's say good morning to people who are showing up. And I saw Julie this morning, first thing. Nice to see you, Julie. Debbie Tibbetts, Two-Meal. I've missed you the last few days, so it's nice to have you with us. You must have been listening from behind the scenes. And Debbie says, hit that thumbs up and like button. And I echo that sentiment. Please hit those buttons. Share the video with your friends. And we had a little chat behind the scenes about how we both loved autumn. When I got up this morning, it was 53 degrees here in my little RV world. And I even covering up with my little furry blanket because my lap is still cold. The heat didn't, I can't have the heat on while I'm talking because it's, loud. Everything's loud in here. But it was cool enough this morning to turn the heat on, and now we know for certain it's getting to be fall. Let's see who else I see out here. Joan Durchie, good morning to you. Teddy, good morning. He says, yay, go Hawks. And Tom W, love you tomatoes. Astro Design family. Our tomatoes have gone crazy. Right? They're just growing like leaps and bounds. And there are so many on the plants out there right now that I'm like kind of concerned that we're going to end up with not being able to get them all to red status. We're probably going to have to make some fried green tomatoes or something out of them. Good morning, Christine Buckingham, and prayers up for Puerto Vallarta and Bali. I don't know what's going on there, Tom. Please inform us. Not to mention Palestine. Absolutely. We do all know what's going on there. Christine Buckingham, good morning. Asa, good morning. Good to have you with us. And TD Hawk, good to see you. Patty, good morning to you. And Mistel, good to have you with us. Natasha, good morning, my friend. I was thinking about you yesterday. I don't remember exactly what got me thinking about you now, but I might have a chat with you later. And Patty, need an oil heater to leave on at 65. I didn't get any tomatoes, Tom said. Lousy year for veggies. A great year for flowers, though. Oh, we have, I can see from where I'm sitting, lots of pumpkins and green beans. Oh my gosh, they just went bumper crop on us. Tomatoes went bumper crop on us. And we're not having much luck with potatoes, which is weird because this is like the potato capital next to Idaho. And Brussels sprouts, not doing very good. I don't know why all that is, but time to, get everything in and get everything ready for the winter. All right, Tom, big floods in PV and Bali, Puerto Vallarta and Bali. Yikes. And I thought Southern California also had some pretty big floods. So those of you like Julie, I know you live in Southern California. How's it going there for you guys? Because I think it was San Bernardino County and part of Kern County, where I used to live in Kern County, was looking like it was mighty flooded from a hurricane or tropical storm that moved up north into Southern California. Okay. And these are just parts of the drama, right? Bay Area this morning had a 4.3 earthquake. Is it a pre-earthquake? Is it like a pre-shock, a foreshock, or is it the main idea, the main thing? So be watching, the west coast of the U.S. for some kind of shock, perhaps, because that's just kind of the energy we have in this chart right now. So here we are in the closing act of the Mars-Pluto cycle. We are in the final square of their cycle together. And remember, the final square of the round of aspects that planets make is the crisis of consciousness. So considering that Mars is a planet of action and aggression, warrior status kind of energy, and Pluto is also a great transformer, contributing to social upheaval and cultural wars and all that kind of stuff. We have this crisis of consciousness point now between these two planets that is suggesting it's time for us to rise above and to make some changes in the way that we are interacting in the world. The question becomes, can we do it? Right? Can we do it in the face of all of this big energy that has been pushing us for change, but also creating such havoc in the world, not just in the USA where I live, but you know, as we see all around the world, different kinds of havoc, but havoc nonetheless. So we're going to go back in time. So go back in time to the conjunction of Mars and Pluto, because all of the cycles of the planets begin with the conjunction of those two planets. And Mars and Pluto had their conjunction, their most recent conjunction, on February 14th, 2024. And this occurred in Aquarius. And this was one of Pluto's, I think it was the second time Pluto had moved into Aquarius. And there's one more time for him to have moved back into Capricorn. So we're getting glimpses, right? On February 14th, 2024, we were getting glimpses of the potential of what Mars and Pluto would do together in the sign of Aquarius. A seed was planted around power and action and collective transformation. And at the same time, and I'm going to bring in other parts of the world at times too. At the same time, Gaza saw some devastating strikes and conflicts globally flared up. Mars and Pluto energy was on full display at that point in time, right? They often bring up conflict, right? These are the two that can bring up war and bombings and just actions that are kind of troubling on the world stage. That's just the energy that these two have together. Now they came into their first square with one another, and a square is a 90-degree angle, and it's a time of tension, right? It brings up tension. And sometimes that tension is anxiety. Sometimes it is outright difficulties that we see in the world or in our personal lives, even if we're experiencing square. And that square was on June 11th of 2024, when Mars was in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius. So friction rose at that point in time. Ukraine, Gaza, and other world hotspots saw intensification in their conflicts. Power struggles surfaced. Civilian costs became more visible, right? The death toll in Gaza, the toll on the children and the infrastructure and how people could support themselves and even, feed themselves. Then the opposition. Now, the opposition is like a culmination point, much like a full moon, right? The full moon, it brings a time of culmination, a time of illumination or revelation, right? It is sometimes very difficult as things can come to an abrupt end, or we can have issues that come up around completing something, right? Or it could be a good completion too. It's not always negative, but because we're talking Mars and Pluto, the potential for it to be not so enjoyable is higher than to be enjoyable. That's just the way it goes with these two planets. And that opposition occurred on November 3rd, 2024, when Cancer was the place that Mars was in. And remember, Mars at this point is slowing down because he's getting ready to enter into his retrograde phase. And Pluto had moved back into Capricorn. He was sitting at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this is the standoff energy, right? This is entrenched sides dug in. And international outrage grew, war crimes grew, or investigations into war crimes grew, and they gained momentum. So the polarity of Mars and Pluto were sort of laid bare for us at this point in time. And of course, that date closely coincides with the US election that has seen a whole host of horrible events occur since that day. And the closing square is where we are now, right? The closing square is actually, it'll be exact on the 24th, so on Wednesday. But today, Mars is at 0 degrees, Pluto is at 1 degree, so we're seeing them already building up toward this closing square. And Mars in Scorpio is squaring Pluto in Aquarius, and this closing square is about breaking point energy. Something is at a breaking point, culturally, socially, collectively. Right? This is a big change energy. So what began in 2024 with that February 14th conjunction now demands confrontation. escalation and exposure are likely. We're going to see things getting, louder. It might be the call for de-escalation of the war that gets louder in Ukraine. And I just noticed that, even Russia was really attacking Ukraine, and that put Poland on alert, right? Because they were in Poland's airspace. And so we're just dragging in now other countries into this confrontation. So what began in 2024 now demands that we confront it. And this is also in your personal life. Mars is a personal planet. So if you think back to those same dates, what was happening in your own personal life as it relates to the bigger, wider things that were happening. And this is also a point right now at this closing square where the old systems crack and resolution seeds are planted. And we must remember that Pluto is out of bounds, and his being out of bounds outside of the sun's normal path, right? He's beyond that 23.23 degrees. They act outside of the rules, right? They are exaggerated, extreme, and unpredictable. So while Mars, the god of war, has his own specific agenda, the Plutoan agenda of transformation, of undoing the center and moving the margins in toward the center, holds sway, right? So we're really starting to see, hopefully, how the power to the people is happening, right? Power to the people, larger confrontations with groups of people. And with Pluto, this amplifies those themes of power, control, collapse, rebirth, reform. And in Aquarius, it is really highlighting the theme of collective upheaval, where things like humanitarian causes and power shifts in society are happening, right? We've already seen glimpses of it, but now, we're with Mars involved, this is going to get louder. And you might see a shift in how all of that energy impacts people. Just notice with Jimmy Kimmel's firing, or yeah, I think it was a firing from the show, the late night show, that people were calling on everybody to, unsubscribe from their Disney TV subscriptions, which impacts Hulu as well, because like in my case, I have a Hulu Disney Plus kind of subscription. And, standing up with their values, right? Saying we value free speech, we value an open society, and, taking their money, as it were, away from the groups that don't stand up to those values. It's just really interesting to watch it happen. And so those conflicts are palpable at this point in time, and people are doing something about it. They're using their power, their shift in the power from governments and systems and institutions to people to do something about that world that they see, and trying to bring it into alignment with their values. It's really kind of awesome to watch astrology in action, right? Because it's so there in our faces. And of course, this intensifies the whole Mars-Pluto square, because these conflicts escalate under an extreme Pluto. The hidden truths emerge, right? I mean, I think everything that's been happening, sort of, at least in this country, has been a sort of distraction away from the main theme of the Epstein files, right? And where is all that information, and who's on that list, and all of that. But there's also pressure for change that becomes totally unavoidable at this point in time. Totally unavoidable. And that is something interesting to watch. Now, the next conjunction of Mars and Pluto, where a new beginning, so we're in the closing, the final square. So from now until January 27th, 2026, when Mars and Pluto again meet in Aquarius, and a new 2-year cycle begins, because Mars is the faster moving planet. He has a 2-year cycle. So his cycle with Pluto is every 2 years. They begin again with this conjunction. And I I would expect, at that point, Pluto won't be out of bounds, right? He'll have come back in bounds. But I expect that radical shifts in collective power and technology and movements and reform will be very visible in January, right? So we'll start, the calendar year perhaps with some very big things going on, not just here in the USA, but around the world. And that should be really interesting for us to observe. And for you as an individual, take a look at where Scorpio is in your chart. This is where Mars will spend the next 6 weeks transiting through. It'll be intensifying and intensifying passions, the passions of that particular house. It'll be more intense in terms of the things that need to transform because it's going to be wherever it's going to be touching the transformational needs of Pluto and Aquarius. So where is Aquarius in your chart? Because Pluto's been there for a while, stirring the pot, right? Causing some transformation on some level in your chart. And then also look to see if you have any planets in Scorpio or any planets in Aquarius that will be impacted, early degree planets, like anywhere from 0 to 3 degrees of Scorpio and of Aquarius. And if you do, then expect that some of those things will come and hit you personally, power or humanitarian causes, technology stuff, whatever, it is that those houses represent for you in the chart. Now, let's take a look at all of that. I mean, yesterday, eclipse, big news. New moon, big news. Mars and Scorpio, big news. And big news, the fall equinox, right? The fall equinox. And I want to take a look at the fall equinox chart because it's darn near a copy of the partial solar eclipse chart from yesterday. So if we take a look at the chart here, you'll see the green line here forming the square between Mars and Pluto. The green little slash up at the top showing where the beginning of the fall equinox is. And that is at 0 degrees of Libra, which I didn't write in Libra there, but that's the sign of Libra up there. And how all of if you look, you can see the yods in there, the yod still pointing at Mars with the base of Uranus and Neptune. You can still see a T-square, although that's made up because of the ascendant in the chart, not necessarily something that is impactful. We can see another T-square in there with the midheaven of this chart with Jupiter and also the Chiron Eris conjunction. And there's just so many things that are so similar. We still have a yod pointed at Uranus with Mars and with Mars and the ascendant of this chart also forming the base. So we have, some very similar energies. We still have the sun in an opposition to Neptune in this particular chart. So we have, things happening in a chart that represents a reset point. The equinox is a reset point. And this one happens to be where light and dark are in balance, right? Right today, we have an equal hours of sun and equal hours of moon, or sunlight, daylight. Daylight, nighttime. But this year's chart has Mars entering Scorpio. And that already happened early this morning, and the equinox doesn't happen until 2:19 p.m. East Coast time this afternoon. So what we have is Mars already intensifying this whole chart, ramping this up as it were, and pressing into that square with Pluto already, right? Because Pluto's at 1 degree, Mars at 0 degrees. And balance then, which is a Libran hallmark, the sought after equilibrium, harmony, peace, energy, may come only after the imbalances are all revealed. And I'm kind of two minds here, because is there more to the imbalance than what we've already seen? Or are we expecting something more to be brought to the surface during this time? But for you and yourself, right? You and the people that are around you, ask yourself, where do you need to embody love and extend unconditional love? Because that's the theme, right? The theme of the sun and the earth this week are all about love, the love of being in the physical, the divine love of spirit, all embodied within you as the human. And is that the way that you can move through power struggles? Now, I also want to bring something else up that I don't, I'm not a mundane astrologer. Uh, and mundane astrology is really about the astrology of events, right? So you're looking at a chart now of the autumn equinox, right? This is just about today. And a chart drawn up for an event will give you an idea of what to expect during this event. And the equinoxes and solstices always happen at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs, and those are called world points. And world points in astrology serve as significant angles that connect the individual, you, to the collective consciousness, to the bigger influence of the astrological interpretations that we're talking about. So this is where we, the people, get drug into the wider conflict or wider energies of what's being presented during the time. And the cardinal points are all of the ones that fall at the equinoxes and the solstices, right? So we have right now 0 Libra. Libra is a cardinal point. And in astrology, the cardinal points are especially um, energized because they're the energies of new beginnings, right? They're considered the representing what's new, what's possible. And the changing season represents the changing minds, maybe the changing consciousness of the time. So when we get to look at a chart like this, we go, oh, okay. Now the Libra point, which is where we are now, right? 0 Libra. The Libra point represents or is about the relationships that we have, right? It concerns the partnerships that we're in. And that might be the partnerships between countries or the partnerships between communities or different states or just different kinds of your personal partnerships, business and also personal. So taking a look then at this Libra point in your own chart, you could actually draw a chart up for yourself for today and see where all of these planets are. If this were a person, that Libra point is in the 11th house, which would signify perhaps new relationships within the larger communities that you're a part of. Your humanitarian groups, perhaps, that you are a part of, the need for humanitarian and altruistic ways of being. It could also indicate the communities that you have friends within, the networks, social medias that you are a part of, if this were your personal chart. Now, I also want to point out that the moon, which represents the people, so if this were a country's chart, or even if it's not, this is an event chart, the moon itself represents the people. The sun represents the leaders, right? The leaders here for whatever country that you might be pulling up the chart for. So we're looking at leaders here and the need for more cooperation, more negotiation, more seeing how it is that we could work to the best and create win-win situations rather than lose-lose, which seems to be what's going on these days. So we have to come to new ways of working together. And that's from the leadership standpoint. But the moon is also in Libra. The mood of the people, we the people, are also kind of, I'm guessing, sick and tired of conflict and are likely, even though I just can't see how conflict gets solved here in this particular season, not based on this chart, but I can see that the people are really looking for a message or a messenger. Note that the moon in this chart is nearly conjunct exact. It's only like 2.5, 3 degrees from Mercury. Mercury rules the media. It rules the message. It rules the messengers. Seems like the people are looking for a messenger, a person in the embodiment of a person who kind of embodies love, energy, who embodies peace, who embodies cooperation, the spirit of negotiation. The people are tired, they're fatigued, they are getting, caught up in the anger and the rhetoric and the inequality of everything, the anger that's going on. So this chart would look like the people looking for someone to be a leader that resembles peace, or who is looking for peace. And I don't know that we find it. Hard to say, especially with Mars in a square to Pluto. It feels like what we're going to see more of is conflict. But that is what it is, that the people, at least sometime, maybe not today as we enter the season, but maybe by the time Mars and Pluto come into their next conjunction, that we are ready, hopefully, to create a different conversation in the world. So, personally, watch for what is happening in your own life in terms of how it is that you are involved with peace and love. Are you being loving to self, but also to others? Watch where control issues or power struggles are happening. How are they showing up in your relationship, in your work, or in your inner life, right? You could be in a power struggle with your own self. And, get into your body. Get into your body. Walk, breathe. We all breathe, but breathe. I mean, pay attention to your breath and follow it through the body, as it inflates your lungs and then moves through all the cells of the body. Ground, do things that are grounding. The gate 46, where the sun is all about reminding us that love must be lived. It doesn't happen just in the head. It's in the body, right? It's through our actions. Adopt a spiritual practice or strengthen your spiritual practice. Practice unconditional compassion. Gate 25, where the earth is, shows us that love dissolves fear and it breaks deadlocks, right? Love is the answer. It always is the answer. Collectively, though, expect some intensification in global conflicts, at least initially. Stay aware, but not consumed by the mood, or by the news, by the networks, by the drama and the traumas that are going on out there. Ask, what role can you really play in holding balance, truth, and love? That's the question. And it's going to be different for everybody. Not everybody is going to, go to, discontinue their Disney subscription because of the way they, kowtowed to the president's wishes about what can be said on TV. But if that's what you're called to do, then absolutely do it. But there are other ways, of course, in which that we can participate. So the question is, what role do you want to play? So this week we stand at this powerful threshold of this new season, the equinox, bringing presumably balance. But Mars stirs deep transformations and Pluto's pushing us beyond the old rules, right? The old rule book out the window, right? We see it every day, the leadership pushing beyond the rules that have been established by constitution or by agreements. And all of that stirring us to look at the rules and what is it that we want to play by? What are the values that we truly want to live by at this point in time? And remember, the seeds of the new cycle are already on their way, right? Love is still the answer. It is still the answer. And it's embodied love, it's unconditional love, and it's alive in every choice that we make, personally and collectively. All right. So the autumn equinox here is really a reminder that balance isn't static. We tend to think of the scales of justice or the scales as being static, but they're never static, right? Even in your own body, to maintain your balance, standing upright, as it were, is plethora of little tiny changes that are going on in your body between your inner ears, your brain, your muscles, your nerves that keep you standing upright and keep you in harmony, or keep your body in what we call homeostasis. Change upsets that balance, and then we seek to bring it back into balance, but it's never still. right? So even at a time like this where we come into what we think of as balance and harmony at this season, it's dynamic, right? It's a dance between light and dark. It's a dance between the inner and the outer, between the self and the other. So this year's equinox chart, then, if we look at that, it's striking because it really mirrors yesterday's solar eclipse. And the sun is in Libra now, 0 degrees of Libra, or will be this afternoon. When I drew up the chart this morning, it was at 29:59. So it's darn close to that solstice point or equinox point. So the sun in Libra, it will be oppose Neptune. And also Aries is a sign of new beginnings, right? So it kind of matches that Libran energy of the cardinal energy of wanting to move forward. So what's possible with Neptune? What new vision is possibly in the offing? But we also still have Sun in Libra in a fairly close opposition to Saturn, although Saturn's in Pisces, not the exact opposite sign. So what we might have is our leaders, the sun, because the sun represents the leaders, that may be tested by confusion or by the limits of structure, laws, and institutions. But also Saturn here, where we have idealism versus reality. So what is it in reality that leaders can actually do? Because that seems to be, at least in this country, up to the people, right? The people have their voices. And then I also noted that there is a semi-sextile on the equinox, which there wasn't yesterday, because a semi-sextile is a minor configuration. It's a 30-degree relationship between planets. So we call that a minor aspect. And so the orbs are tighter, right? We don't want to do a 3-degree orb. We really want to keep it to 1 or 2 degrees. And today the sun during the equinox is in a semi-sextile to Mars. Mars, 0, sun at 0, right? So it's pretty tight. And that means there's subtle tension between leadership in the mundane chart, subtle tension between leadership and military action and strategy and aggression. So we have this need, it seems, to find a path of cooperation so that we don't have to go all military. And it is interesting because I've seen a lot of articles talking about the military here in this nation. And I know other nations are also experiencing a lot of ups and downs and craziness right now. So I watched a really good video yesterday about things getting ready to blow up in England and the UK. England itself, not maybe the whole of the UK. And I found it fascinating, right, to watch what's going on and how ripe things are for a big shakeup in that island nation, and how often what happens in England also happens here, just a little bit later. So watch what's going on in England. I also noted that Canada, Australia, and what was the other country? I think it was also the UK, voted to recognize Palestine as a state, as a nation. And that's interesting, an interesting development, right? So lots of interesting developments during this equinox window. Also obvious to see that the USA did not join that, right? USA was left out of that. And the USA is being left out of a lot of things now, right? As its power is being subsumed, is being undermined by the government, by the leaders of the country. And we are less thought of in the world at this point in time. So it's interesting to watch the power struggles, the power structures changing across different nations in the world. Then we also have the sun. This week, we're seeing it very powerfully in a trine to both Uranus and Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So these are revolutionary energies. They're part of that minor grand trine configuration that I've talked about since July, that's in effect all the way to 2028. And it's under the pattern, it's like an under pattern that's happening, right? It's an under the surface kind of thing where revolutionary energies are. And there's sudden awakenings here. There are deep transformations flowing easily into the picture, things that we didn't expect that might be happening. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're negative either. I mean, unexpected is, kind of shocking at times, but it might be exactly what we need. And it might be exactly, what starts us moving in a new direction. It might be the seeds suddenly popping up from under the surface. So watch that. The sun trine those two planets, the sun adding a lot of light to Uranus and Gemini and technology and the messaging and truth versus lies and all of that. And then Pluto's transformational energy, power to the people, grassroots movements in Aquarius. And then the moon is in Libra, as I said, for the equinox, which is the people and the people seeking balance and wanting peace and fairness. But they're under the influence of these bigger planetary tensions. And I'm not sure that it's dawned on everybody yet that that is exactly what we need, right? That it's what we need. There's still too many people deep in the unconsciousness of the fourth dimension. There's not yet a plethora of fifth dimensional consciousness on this planet, but we're moving in that direction. So if we look at mundane astrology, and this is, remember, not my strongest suit, but I can tell you what things mean when we're looking at this kind of a chart. The sun equals the leadership of the world or the leadership of a nation, the authority, right? The authority of these people. And now what we have are leadership facing confusion. The potential loss of credibility or the abject loss of credibility, right? But also opportunities for breakthroughs, that Uranian power to bring surprises and awakening when we least expect it. And maybe profound reform coming from Pluto, who is in out of bounds territory that is equal to reform energy outside of the sun, right? He's outside of the leaders at this point. So he has this ability at this point to bring major change without the leadership of the world being involved. So it's almost like this whole underworld authority that is coming up and changing things over without the consent, perhaps, of the leaders of the world. Then we have the moon, the people, populations that seek peace. I mean, nowhere else on this earth right now is peace more needed than when we look at the Israeli-Gazan conflict and we look at the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and how that is sort of this picture of the dis-ease of war that is happening, this disease of this power structure that has been in place for so long that needs to be upended, right? And Mercury, the media, right? The messaging, the messengers. This is about communication and how the narrative shapes perception, right? We often have heard the saying that history is written by the winners of the wars, right? So that means that the people in power write the history. And right now, you see a lot of rewriting of history going on where things like diversity, equality, and inclusion are under fire, where they're rewriting the concept of what immigration is, right? This country built on bring me your give us your tired, your poor, your teeming masses yearning to breathe free, only legally, right? Again, I don't want to get into a value judgment thing here, but interesting concept, right? Where are we out of sync with that? And what can we do about it in a positive way, in a positive, loving way? I just can't imagine that these cages that people are in, these prisons that people are in, because they're here illegally or perceived to have come in illegally, that is a loving way to treat them. That just flies in the face of my social thoughts. But Uranus also, oh, wait, let's finish Mercury. Watch what stories are being amplified. What's coming up bigger in the news cycles for this season, right? Watch what brings up what's being brought up. Uranus, uprisings, revolutions, people on the move, social movements, rebellion, sudden changes in technology and communication. Neptune, illusions, the higher vision also that people have of the collective, right? So collective ideals that may blur the lines of reality and can inspire dreams, but also bring confusion, right? It feels a little bit like so many things have been happening that we can't even keep track of them all. And what do we do, right? It gets lost, it gets blurred. And then Saturn, structure, law, control, and the institutions, governments, and authority being tested under pressure in this season because they're under the oppositions, right? The sun is opposing Saturn, the sun is opposing Neptune. So the equinox asks each of us to sort of find the inner balance between what the outer world feels like when it's chaotic and how it is that we can create peace right within ourselves. And the people, the moon here in Libra as well, longing for harmony, while leadership is challenged to rise above the confusion and to take transformative and visionary action. And when I say, visionary, I don't mean a vision of going backward. I don't mean a vision of patriarchy. I don't mean that at all. When I speak of visionary, I'm saying let's look to the future and how can we make a better future for all of us, right? Our children, our grandchildren. And the revolutionary energy is in the mix. We just don't get away from that. Change is inevitable. And it shows up here in this chart, right? Your job is to come back to Libra's gifts: balance, harmony, relationship, love, justice, right? Fairness, equality, all of those beautiful energies. I'm going to stop for just a second and see how people are feeling. I mean, I try very hard in the mornings when I talk to you not to bring my opinions in here, um, just to stick with the astrology. But even the astrology at this point seems very polarized, right? There's lots of polarizing energy, and it's hard to see. Well, what is the right direction to go? Right? If we look at this country, look at your own countries, because I know some of you are from other countries. What is the right way to go? Is it the left, or is it the right, or is it neither of those? I think it has to be more down the middle. This is what would seem to be suggested by the Libran equinox, right? To balance those scales, to come into moderation in all things. And what helps with moderation is to remember what is the most loving thing to do. Love is always the answer. You're going to hear me say this a lot. Love, it's in my background. Love is the answer to every question. All right. Let's see here. I got to go back a little bit. Oh my gosh, my tomatoes tried, but abysmal. Okay, I read that one. Debbie, Tom, I got one. I don't know what that is. Okay. Tom says, lest we forget that Roseanne Barr got fired from ABC just over a tweet, right? I mean, we got to look at that. And as well, I noticed the president this morning was picking on Roseanne Barr again. I'm not sure what that's all about because I did not follow that thread, but it'd be interesting to see. She's always outspoken anyway, right? So I don't know what that was all about. Christine, there are many evangelicals online claiming that 9/22 to 24 that the rapture is happening. Bizarre videos where they claim the world ends in the next few days. Not seen that at all, Christine. But when we have this level of aspect patterns that are happening, it is the case. And honestly, it's people like those evangelicals who are absolutely trying to bring about the apocalypse, right? They are literally in glee over some of the things that they see happening because they, in their minds, see that this power outside of themselves is going to come in and right the ship, whatever that means, right? So it's just really interesting. It's all a circus show, yeah. Not just the preachers, but those who believe that stuff. All of that stuff is so ridiculous. It's so over the top, and it's so hard to believe that we all still that that there's still this belief in a power outside of yourself. But I guess we're evolving, right? It's part of the process. We stand with Jimmy and Stephen. Patty says, Christine Buckingham, Scorpio 055 Jupiter retrograde in the 7th, whole sign houses. So relationships, partnerships. The 7th house also open enemies, right? Open enemies, the things, the people that you know that aren't your friends, right? And how it is that you handle that. Debbie Tippett's two meal, that's one more than I. I don't know what that means, Debbie, but did you all dance to Earth, Wind, and Fire yesterday? I did. I heard them every commercial during the games, the football games yesterday had Earth, Wind, and Fire. That was kind of cool. And Christine Elon went to England to join up its far right Tommy Robinson. Right? He can't get traction in the US anymore, so he goes to England. Okay, yay. Hi, Leilani. Sorry I caught the live late. It's good to see you, though. And Christine wants to deny, not Christine, they want to deny that slavery was evil, removing actual photos and historical facts and books and teachings and just history. They're rewriting freaking history, trying to. And we cannot let them get away with that because we have to know that the lessons of the past help us to prevent those same things from happening in the future. And that's Project 2025. You're absolutely right, Christine. And doesn't the astrology kind of mirror the French Revolution and the Civil War period and the Revolutionary War period and, the Civil War era here in the US? I mean, so many of the big things that we fought for over time are kind of back in our faces, right? For us to decide. Because actually, if you think about the things that we fought for during the Revolutionary War, the French Revolution, so forth, there were ideals there. And are we living up to those ideals? And so what comes up during a time period like we're in now are all the anti-ideals, right? The things that show us where we're not in alignment with those ideals. That's what we're seeing a lot of, right? The anti-ideals. And that's why it mirrors it, right? It's showing us through shadow where it is we're not even aligned with the things that we fought for, right? Where we're no longer aligned with those things. And I'd say Fox News, Kilmeade calling for involuntary lethal injections given to homeless people. Oh my God. And Tamara, I may not like what some people say, but we have free speech in this country. Exactly the point. Or do we? At this point, I think that's what's being you know what all this really reminds me of? Have you guys ever seen the movie V for Vendetta, where the one guy, gets on air and he makes fun of the president of England, I believe this is, because it's all about Guy Fawkes Day. And then he ends up murdered for having said what he did about the president. Think about that, y'all. And, saying things about other people. And that is antithetical, anti-ideals to at least here in the USA. So we got to watch that stuff. All right. Now, in the last minute or two that I have with you, Saturn this week also moves back to the gate 36, a gate called crisis or turmoil. I just want to laugh. We've already had this here. It's retrograde, so we're going back to this gate. In quantum human design, we call this the gate of exploration. And it is hopefully a gate where we can see what some of the negative things are that we've experienced and what the positive experiences are that we've had that we want to re-emphasize. And this is an energy in the gene keys in the shadow is called turbulence. In the gift, it's humanity. And in the highest expression, the siddhi is compassion. So Saturn moving back into this gate, reminding us that the journey from turbulence to compassion is through our humanity, right? Through our humanity, the love of being a human in the physical body, the love of the divine human that the body embodies. All right. So the shadow of this gate 36, where we may feel overwhelmed, chaotic and crisis prone, that's this week. And gift, learning through experience, developing empathy and sympathy and compassion and love from, a deeper place within us, and understanding and tolerance and acceptance. And the Siddhi, deep compassion, right? The ability, the capacity to embrace suffering and transmute it into love, right? To transmute into love. And Saturn here, is responsibility and discipline and maturity and the lessons that we're learning. And when he comes back into the gate 36, the crisis isn't random. No randomness here. It's the test of whether we can step into the challenges with maturity and purpose. Can we overcome? Can we be mature, responsible, loving adults and make choices that mirror that maturity? Collectively, this may look like more turbulence in global hotspots, right? Things churning up, conflict zones, refugee crises, humanitarian crises, that type of thing, emergencies. It may look like structures under pressure to respond with compassion instead of control. But unfortunately, we get kind of control first. Demands for greater accountability from our leaders, from the leaders. When people are in crisis, we want to know why people aren't getting humanitarian aid. Why are there starving children lying on the streets of Gaza? Why? Simply because they have a different belief system? Simply because the government had attacked another government? Does not seem fair that the children, the people, suffer so much for it. And personally, this transit might be about, where do you have fear that keeps coming up? And where is it that you need to move through that fear? Where do you need to show up with responsibility in your life? And how can you cultivate humanity and compassion as guiding principles for your life moving forward? So notice where turbulence is arising. Notice where, Saturn is telling you you can't avoid the lesson. You've got to face it square on, right? And I guess that's it for me this morning. I mean, I could keep going on and on. Remember to stay present, stay grounded, stay in your body, right? Be there, be loving, be kind, be generous, be all the things that we know are the highest human attributes, right? Be that to yourself, be that to others. And I will see you on Friday, where we'll take up the end of September's transits and maybe steal a peek at what is coming up for October. That's it for me today, guys. Take care. Bye for now.